I was away last week for a family reunion at the ocean. I was with 14 nieces and nephews. So it was a restful time, but it wasn't a quiet time. But where we were staying was just 2 blocks from the local Catholic church. So I went every day to concelebrate daily Mass at that parish. They were very welcoming. And I was inspired to see in the middle of the summer over 200 people at daily Mass. A daily Mass. So sometimes the temptation when you're on vacation is not to take time for prayer. But here were people who saw it as an opportunity to pray more. Maybe they work during their normal week, they don't have time, or they have family duties, they can't go to daily Mass, but on vacation, when they were less rushed, they took time to pray. So that was just encouraging. The church is alive in different ways. You see it in different places. 2 points of reflection this morning. The first is on our scriptures. Simply a reminder that God provides for us. The first reading is from the book of Exodus. As Moses is leading the Jewish people out of Egypt through the desert to some new land, they're not even sure where they're going. And they're in a desert, so food is scarce, water is scarce. And they start grumbling. Moses, what's your plan? We're hungry. There's no food around. So Moses prays, and the next morning when they wake up, there's this thin covering over the ground, and when they scoop it up, it's like bread. They can eat it. It's called manna. So in an unexpected way, God provided for their bodily needs. He kept providing food for them as they went through the desert. A similar theme in the gospel today from John chapter 6. We began reading chapter 6 last week. We'll continue reading it for the next 4 weeks. In the gospel today, Jesus said, "You remember the manna which God gave to your ancestors in the desert, food for your bodies." He says, "But my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. The bread of God is that which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never hunger. Whoever believes in me will never thirst." So he promises to satisfy our souls, to provide for our souls. He says, if you come to me, if you believe in me, I will satisfy your desires. We might speak of this as both and. We have the Catholic both and. The Catholic faith kind of covers everything. It's very kind of sophisticated because it's what God taught us. It's the truth of life. And so the reminder that God provides for both our bodies and our souls. That as Christians we focus both on life here and now, but also and life in heaven. So let's keep those two in play. God provides for our bodies everything that we have, he made, right? He made food, he made water, he made oxygen, he made all the natural resources that we use. Always remember that. And then he provides for our souls. What are the desires of our souls? What do we thirst for? We want to be seen to be valuable and to be important, to have something significant to contribute. And those who connect with God through Jesus taught us what? God knows each of us and values us. He loves each of us. He says, I call you friends. You have dignity, and he says you are important. God has worked for each of you to do in a different way. You're part of his plan in some way, now and forever. So God provides for us. The second point this morning I want to reflect on is our pastorate of St. Francis of Assisi and St. Louis. And just an encouragement, a reminder that a pastorate can strengthen us. This is the 4th pastorate in which I've served, linking together different parishes. And we have a saying now among the priests, well, if one parish is good, 2 is better, and sometimes 3. But when a pastorate is formed, I think there's a lot of concern. Will this kind of stretch us out too much? Will it spread out our resources too much? Will it detract from our parish life? But I think the experience shows it's just the opposite, if done well. That no, you're just expanding your opportunities. Sometimes, especially among Protestant churches, if they have a successful church going somewhere, they'll say, let's plant another church in the neighboring community. Let's expand. Well, you might say that 3 years ago, when this pastorate was formed, St. Francis of Assisi planted a new church in Clarksville, and St. Louis planted a new church in Fulton. Right? We expand our reach. We're all Catholics. We're all Christians. Each parish does have its own culture and history, but we're basically doing the same work. strengthening our families and hopefully our neighborhoods. So think about the opportunities. Instead of just having one priest here at the parish, we now have two between both parishes. Instead of having just one seminarian here, Seminarian Dan Ackward, thanks be to God, the parish has a seminarian, but now we have two. We also have Jack Morris at St. Louis. Instead of having one deacon, Deacon Bob Smith, thank God we have a deacon, we now have 6 between the two parishes. Instead of just 7 staff members who work very hard and generously here, between both parishes we now have over 20 staff members. Instead of just having this one church building between the two parishes, we now have 3. We have the new St. Louis Church plus the Old Stone Chapel and this building here. In our religious education program, we form about 250 children a year, but between both parishes, we form over 1,000 children between the school and religious education departments. So much opportunity to influence people for the good, to influence minds and ideas and attitudes and souls. And why these two parishes linked together? Was it just a coincidence? Just a whim of the Archbishop? Pope John Paul used to say, in the designs of providence, there are no mere coincidences, right? For those who are trying to serve Jesus and are praying, trust that when things happen, it's part of his plan. You might not always see the logic of it right away, but later it comes more clear. So this linkage of our two parishes, and I think our two patron saints can give us some guidance as we try to continue. We've been working and praying together for 3 years. So St. Francis of Assisi and St. Louis IX, the King of France. They at first seem so different, right? One was a rich king and one was a poor Franciscan. One was a peacemaker, Francis, and one was a crusader knight, Louis. But their lives kind of crossed over in the sense both lived in the 1200s, same time period. Both went to the Holy Land. Francis went to meet the Muslim imam in Jerusalem to convert him. He's like, I want to meet the imam. For what? I want to teach him about Jesus. That usually doesn't end well when you try to do that these days. But the imam was so impressed by the boldness of Francis, he's like, let him in. I want to hear this guy. Louis led an army on the Crusades and never actually made it to Jerusalem. He actually died on the crusade. Both had a Franciscan heart. King Louis was friends of St. Bonaventure, who was a Franciscan, who actually was the minister general of the order 30 years after Francis. And he gave spiritual direction to King Louis. So both had Franciscan influences. And they, in a sense, had a similar mission from God. Francis was called to rebuild the church. One day he was praying before the San Damiano cross, the church of San Damiano, and he heard Jesus say from the crucifix, Francis, rebuild my church. Louis, on the other hand, was called to defend the church from the outside. Francis to reform it from the inside, Louis to defend it. When we think of Francis, how did he do it? He's probably the best-known Catholic saint. A lot of non-Christians even have great respect for St. Francis. They go to Assisi, that place of peace. I've had the privilege of going there about 10 times. I studied in seminary in Rome, so we often went up to Assisi to get out of the busy city of Rome. But this place of peace. But he did it how? He did it by embracing poverty, being poor with the poor. He was an ordained deacon of the Catholic Church, preaching and teaching through his great joy, attracting people to Christ through his joy. Thousands of men and women joined him then and continue today in the Franciscan order 800 years ago. King Louis did it differently, right? He was married, Queen Margaret. He had 12 children, very generous. A lot of money, a lot of influence and authority as a king. But he too cared for the poor. He had a heart for the poor. They said every day about 100 people would come to the palace to be fed. There's a letter he wrote to his son. He said, Son, my first instruction is that you love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your strength, and be kind-hearted to the poor, the unfortunate, and the afflicted. Give them as much help and consolation as you can. So Louis, he didn't say, well, I'm going to use this authority and wealth to serve myself. Rather, he said, I'm going to use it to serve others, to help those who are poor, to promote the Catholic faith in France, and also to defend the faith, to kind of in the struggle for religious freedom. The Crusades are a very complicated part of history. You have to remember it was a time of empires. It's hard for us to even understand what an empire is. There was the Holy Roman Empire, the Christian Empire, and there was a Muslim Empire, and they clashed. They clashed politically and also religiously. But basically, he was trying to preserve freedom of religion for Christians in the Holy Land. So they did their work. They served God in very different ways. So what about us? What about you? How can you serve? Many of you do serve already, but when I come to a parish and I look out at the congregation, I say, wow, there's so many people. There's so much talent in this parish. People with different experience, different education, backgrounds, interests. And if we could harness all that talent and engage it. And sometimes you say, I don't want to be engaged, Father. I come to church to relax. I'm engaged enough all week long. I'm busy. Well, we do relax during our hour of Mass each week and hopefully are refreshed. But also, God does want us to be engaged in the parish life as well, in our spiritual lives. And so you think, if there's something you see going on in a parish and you say, we could do that better, help us do it better, right? Help us to be excellent in all ways. This parish has a very good history. St. Louis has a good history, but we're always renewing, always kind of refreshing what we do, reconsidering it. So you have people who have backgrounds in finance or in politics or in art or in teaching, in food industry, in construction, social media. Let's employ all that talent to bring God to our families and to our neighbors, his teachings, his sacraments, his charity. We have been doing it, but I think with our pastorate and coming out of the kind of the coronavirus year, a chance to kind of recommit and refocus. Again, each of us will do it differently, just as Francis and Louis. St. Francis de Sales was known to give great spiritual direction to people, give them guidance in their lives. He wrote, God commands Christians to bring forth the fruits of devotion, each one in accord with his character and station and calling. Devotion must be practiced in different ways by the nobleman and by the working man, by the servant and by the prince, by the widow, the unmarried girl, and the married woman, by the priest and the layman. But even these distinctions are not sufficient, for the practice of devotion must be adapted to the strength, to the occupation, and to the duties of each one in particular. So God is going to ask each of us to serve in a different way, according to our abilities and our opportunities at this stage of your life, wherever you are, whatever your circumstances are. Some can serve some way now and in other ways later. Someone said to me when I was newly assigned here to Fulton and Clarksville, they said, it seems like there are as many employers as there are employees in Howard County. It's kind of a hard-charging county. Great. Lead in the parish. Bring your enthusiasm, your ability, your zeal. Come and help lead and to give what you have. So my brothers and sisters, we are reminded God will provide for us, for both our bodies and our souls, if we turn to him. And we are challenged to provide for God here in our pastorate, imitating St. Francis and St. Louis, each in our own way. Together, let us do great things with God. Amen.